All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Sure, thank you. So we're reading from Canto 3, Chapter 5, Text 29. Archita Prabhu texted me 29 yesterday at 29. Okay, thank you. That'll make the class quite different than I expected. Let me see, find it. Okay. All right. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So I'll begin reading the word for word. Mahat Tatvat Vikurvanat Aham Tatvam Vyajayata Karya Karana Kartri Atma Bhuta Indriya Manamaya Vaikarika Taijasa Cha Tamasaha Cha Iti Aham Trida Mahatattva Vikurvanad Aham Tattvam Vyajayata Kurya Karana Kartratma Bhutendriya Manomaya Vaikarikastaijasascha Tamasaschetyanam Trida Mahatattvat Vikurvanad Aham Tattvam Vyajayata Karya Karana Kartratma Bhutendriya Manomaya Vaikarikastaijasascha Tamasaschetyanat anam trida Mahatattva Vikurvanan Aham Tattvam Vyajayata Karya Karana Kartratma Bhutendriya Manomaya Vaikarikastaijasascha Tamasaschetyanam Trida. Please chant. Tamaseschaitaham trida. Tattvam vipurvana. Aham tattvam vijayata. Tattvam udendriya manomaya. Vaishnavis. Matadva vikurana ahamanata jayata indriya manomaya vakarikastajastascha tamasaschainanam vida. Mahatattvam vikurvanan aham tattvam janita karyakarana khatratma bhutendriya manomaya vaikarikastajascha tamasaschaitanam tridva. All right, synonyms. Mahat, the great. Tadvat, from the causal truth. Vikurvanat, being transformed. Aham, false ego. Tattvam, material truth. Vyajayata, being manifested. Karya, effects. Karana, cause. Kartri, the doer. Atma, soul or source. Bhuta, material ingredients. Indriya, senses. Manamaya, hovering on the mental plane. Vaikarikaha, the mode of goodness. Taijasa, the mode of passion. Cha, and. Tamasaha, the mode of ignorance. Cha, and. Iti, thus. Aham, false ego. Trida, three kinds. Translation and purports by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Mahatattva, or the great causal truth, transforms into false ego, which is manifested in three phases: cause, effect, and the doer. All such activities are on the mental plane and are based on the material elements, gross senses, and mental speculation. The false ego is represented in three different modes: goodness, passion, and ignorance. Purport. A pure living entity in his original spiritual existence is fully conscious of his constitutional position as an eternal servitor of the Lord. All souls who are situated in such pure consciousness are liberated, and therefore they eternally live in bliss and knowledge in the various Vaikuntha planets in the spiritual sky. When the material creation is manifested, it is not meant for them. The eternally liberated souls are called Nitya Muktas, and they have nothing to do with the material creation. The material creation is meant for rebellious souls who are not prepared to accept subordination under the Supreme Lord. This spirit of false lordship is called false ego. It is manifested in three modes of material nature, and it exists in mental speculation only. Those who are in the mode of goodness think that each and every person is God, and thus They laugh at the pure devotees who try to engage in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Those who are puffed up by the mode of passion try to lord it over material nature in various ways. Some of them engage in altruistic activities, or if they were agents appointed to do good to others by their mental speculative plans. Such men accept the standard ways of mundane altruism, but their plans are made on the basis of false ego. This false ego extends to the limit of becoming one with the Lord. The last class of egoistic conditioned souls, those in the mode of ignorance, are misguided by identification of the gross body with the self. Thus, all their activities are centered around the body only. All these persons are given the chance to play with the false egoistic ideas, but at the same time, the Lord is kind enough to give them a chance to take help from scriptures like Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, so that they may understand the science of Krishna and thus make their lives successful. The entire material creation, therefore, is meant for the falsely egoistic living entities hovering on the mental plane under different illusions in the modes of material nature. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuru Militamina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I humbly ask all the blessings of the devotees so that I may say something that proper and beneficial and enlightening to the discussion on Srimad Bhagavatam. So, in this translation, it's talking about the Mahotsava, which is a combination of all material ingredients. If one remembers the picture of the Ishopanishad, not the one with Keshava standing in the water, but the one where there's Vishnu and Krishna, and there's like a dark cloud, and Vishnu's in the causal ocean, and all the universes are around him, and we're living in one of those universes in the dark cloud, which is the Mahotsava, or the combination of all the material ingredients. I don't know, Shamurari, if you can pull up that picture, that'd be nice, just for a visual, if it's possible. It's probably Ishopanishad, Google Images. Probably, I don't know if it'll pop up. Anyway, so Vishnu is lying in the Mahotsava, and he glances at material nature and impregnates her with all the living entities who come out from the Mahotsava. So a little bit similarity between, in one sense, okay, it's very different than the scientific explanation. They talk about like a big bang, and there's like a gas cloud, and something by chance, there's an explosion, and then things come out. But the Mahotsava is like a giant cloud of material ingredients, and by being energized by the glance of the Supreme Lord, then the living entities start coming out, things start happening, things start coming together. The missing piece that they don't talk about is that there's divine intelligence behind it that is directing it. It's very systematic. And Krishna it's talking about causes here. So he's Sarvakarna Karna. He's the cause of all causes. So ultimately, the ultimate cause, the cause we may not be able to see or even speculate about, like the scientists try, is that it's all coming from Krishna. I was also thinking of when there's like fertile land or fertile soil, you place the seeds in them, and then many plants come out. So the Mahotsava is like fertile land, and Lord Vishnu, ultimately Krishna, is placing the seeds of the living entity in the matter, the soil, and they're all coming out. Just to step back a second, the Srimad Bhagavatam is very expansive, and it goes over a lot of topics. So some of the verses are a little bit more scientific and difficult to understand, and some of the verses are a little bit more practical, like you can get them and take to them immediately. My spiritual master explains it's like walking around Govardhan Hill. So some parts are very smooth and some parts are bumpy. So we are currently in a bumpy phase of the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's a phase where I just say, okay, I accept. Why do I accept? Because I trust Srila Prabhupada. Because his instructions have made my life much happier. So, and there's so many things that I appreciate about him because of his wonderful disciples and all the mercy they showed me growing up, that I just like this part of the Bhagavatam where it's talking about where false ego comes from. I just accept, because I'm not going to go up there and do research and surrender to mental speculation. We have to always remember that our acharyas, like for example the Goswamis, they were engaged in devotional service like 22 hours a day. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was the topmost scholar, as well as being the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we're in good hands, and we're not going to surpass the expanse of what they've given us. It would be a squandering of this opportunity. So you can just rest assured. And you can rest assured in the beginning, but as you read these literatures and you live your life, you'll see how they connect, and you'll get spiritual realization. So that being said, back to the translation. So it's talking about the mental plane and activities like material elements, gross senses, and mental speculation. So mental speculation is like how the scientists, they try to figure out things. That I think there was a gas cloud, and perhaps, and it's a very unstable thing, because sometimes you can accept something, and then after a couple of years you just reject it, and it depends. It's called the chariot of the mind, or the Manoratena. It's going here and then it's going there. So we try to stay off the mental speculation plane and try to understand what our acharyas are telling us, like receiving instructions from a expert physician or professor, rather than just trying to learn how to be a doctor yourself. And they also, speaking of the causal ocean, which is in the Mahotsava, it's interesting to note that, also in the scientific community, they say that like the life started in the ocean. So there were the oceans, and because of the sunlight and the combination with the water, then there's the growth of amino acids. I don't know, the schools I work at, they play this guy, Bill Nye the Science Guy, and he's like, okay, so, the combination of the light hits the water, and then, there's amino acids, which is the basis of life, and then they take a stretch, and then they do a lot of speculation. So yeah, being on the mental platform is not a good idea. It's not reliable. It's called a chariot because it goes here and there. There's a verse, Manoratena asato davato bahi, that those who are non-devotees, they have material qualifications which are of little value, because they're on the mental platform, and they're always like, I like something today, and tomorrow I hate it. I don't like it anymore. And you can see that in many fields, like every 10 years they change their idea. And part of that is because everyone wants to be a mental speculator. You have to create something new to be distinguished and recognized and respected. So they're saying, we really want you to believe in something, but after 10 years, then you look back and you say, those guys 10 years ago were foolish, and they didn't know what they were talking about, but you need to trust us. And just by that rationale, then we'll just wait 10 years, then we'll see how it changes. So yeah, Manoratena asato davato bahi. This is also mentioned in the Panchatantra, Nahi suptasya simhasya pravishanti mukhe mrida, I don't know the first two lines of the verse, but I'm sure Archie Prabhu does. But did you want to say it? Nahi suptasya simhasya pravishante mukhe mrida. And there's one line in there that says, na manorata. Don't be on the mental chariot, Don't take shelter of your mind. Because we know from Bhagavad Gita, the mind can be the worst of enemies if it's not conquered. And when we conquer the mind, then it becomes the best of friends. Like Sri Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, he said, in the morning I beat my mind with shoes, and in the evening I beat it with a broom. So, part of this whole temple program is, we're training the mind to be our friend. And like japa time, 2 hours, you have to really invest time to try to control the wild horse of the mind. And, that will free you from the tendency to mentally speculate. Okay. And the scientists often speak in terms of like perhaps maybe, like you also see this in in figuring out how the universe was formed. There's a lot of speculation. Like they present these dinosaur bones and, they pick up a rock and say, this is a tooth. And it's like, is it? Or is it you can find a rock that looks like anything. And especially if you're really trying to like make the pieces fit, you can say it's not a rock. This is like a elbow bone of like this creature, I've seen it. They put documentaries, and the scientist goes out and digs in the hills, and he gets this tiny piece, it's like a long rock, and it has a little bit of distinctions, and he says, this is from this giant lizard, and then the CG creates this lizard, and you say you started with this little piece of rock, and you're sure that it's a whole lizard, and they construct the whole body. I'm like, come on, what kind of evidence is that? You could have just sculpted that. But like, and they're saying like this is the shoulder bone. Like, how do you know? Like the shoulder bone. Anyway. So these are kind of the pitfalls we can fall in from mental speculation. It used to be illegal to speculate a couple hundred years ago. Oh, thank you, Sham Murari Prabhu. So here's the picture of the Ishopanishad, and there's Krishna's effulgence coming out from Goloka Vrindavan, but then there's this darkness. And it's actually a giant cloud. That's the Mahotsava. And within the Mahotsava is Lord Vishnu, lying down in the causal ocean. And all the universes are coming out from him. And we're in one of these universes on a planet called Earth. So that's the Vedic perspective. The verse also talks about false ego, which means like I'm acting like somebody I'm not. Like when they say he has an ego, like a person has an ego, it's actually a false ego. You're acting contrary to the way you're supposed to be. Because our constitutional position is Jive Swarupoi Nitya Krishna Das. We're eternal servants of Lord Krishna. But right now, because of Maya, we're acting like Krishna's competitor. So trying to exploit and enjoy instead of serve. So, and then there's also the modes of nature, goodness when you see things soberly the way they are, passion when you're trying to enjoy things, with great endeavor, like conquer territory, and amass riches and enjoy lots of members of the opposite sex. And there's ignorance, take pleasure in intoxication, like that. So in the purport of this verse, it's stressing this point that Jive Swarupoi Nitya Krishna Das, that I'm an eternal servant of Lord Krishna. And that's why we have all these services here to help train us, or not train us, but reestablish our proper understanding to bring us to normal consciousness. And these services like japa and deity worship and cooking for Krishna, these are all reminding us that actually that's who we really are. We're eternal servants of Lord Krishna. And when we have pure consciousness, we're living in Vaikuntha. Vaikuntha means no worries. Vai, no, and Kunta, no worries. So how do we live in Vaikuntha? So there's a verse, Bhoktaram yagya tapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suridam sarvabhutanam gyatva mam shantim richati. We have to understand that the Supreme Krishna is the Supreme Lord of all planets and demigods. And he's the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities. And all sacrifices and austerities are meant to please him. Suridam means he's our very close friend, very intimate friend. And also the devotee is Suridam, like Suridam Sarva Dehinam, Sadhava Sadhubhushanam. So we are also, or the devotees are also the friends of the living entities. And by doing real welfare work, which is spreading Krishna consciousness, preaching to people and helping them elevate to their natural position. Oh, it's 8:16? Okay. So the material creation is meant for the impure souls who want to lord it over nature. So the pure souls are nitya muktas, they're eternally liberated, and the conditioned souls are called nitya baddhas. The material world is for the rebellious souls, as mentioned in the purport. Those who don't accept the codes given by God. There's a verse, Vishnu Bhakta Smrito Deva Asura Tatviparyaya, from the Padma Purana. It says that the devotees of Vishnu are godly, but those who are the opposite, they're demons. This material world is for those who are infested with the demoniac qualities. So that's what this place is built for. So this attitude of falsely resisting Krishna's subordination, this is false ego. Real ego is that we're eternal servants of Krishna, and false ego is that we are enjoyers. We are trying to enjoy on the same level as Krishna. So our mind, this theory of trying to be a competitor with Krishna is coming from mental speculation. Our mind is presenting us with this theory that we want to enjoy like God and try to become like him. So the Mayavadis, they think that they're God and everyone is God. They can enjoy like him. Of course, if they're God, then why are they forced to accept birth, death, old age, and disease? And they say, well, we're God, but right now we're in Maya, and when we come out of Maya, then we'll become God. Well, that means Maya is more powerful than God. So Maya is God, not them, So anyway, they have many different, they have their theories. They think that it's silly to serve in devotional service because, God is everyone. You just serve everyone. And devotional service is like for sentimentalists. So they laugh at the devotees. They think that this is just sentiment. Like, don't you know you're God? Why do you need to engage in service? Because you're God. You don't need to serve anyone. And this is their idea. So we can see practically in our society how they're trying to lord it over material nature. And because everything, all the inventions and technologies are simply meant for trying to get as much sense gratification, eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. And so some of these Mayavadis and Karmis, they do some altruistic work that's based on mental speculation. But because their intelligence is not pure and they neglect devotional service, they again come down to the mundane realm. So there's this verse, Yene Arvindaksha Vibhuktamaninas Tvayastabhava Avishuddha Buddhaya Aruna Krichena Param Tata Patantya Ado Nadrita Yusmayangraha. So that's the verse from the 10th canto that explains that. So identifying, the verse also talks about identifying with our body, that's gross ignorance. But we can see that, like in the example, like when a person passes away, what passed away? The body's still there. So the person, my father is gone, that means we're something other than the body. Because the spirit soul leaves and the body is still there. So people are lost to their false egoism. They're thinking they're the body and they think they're the Lord of all they survey. But Krishna is so kind that he gives us Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita so that we can reestablish our relationship with him, so that we have some hope. We don't have to take shelter of guessing and mental speculation. And there's a nice verse from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Maya Mugdha Jivera Nahi Swata Krishna Gyan Jivera Kripa Kaila Veda Puran. I missed a word there, but anyway. The conditioned souls cannot revive their Krishna consciousness by their own efforts, meaning by their mental speculation. But by the mercy of Krishna, their Vedic literatures, like the Srimad Bhagavatam and the supplemental Puranas that can help us, guide us, explain everything clearly. I mean, if you're lucky, you can read an hour a day. It's very fortunate. You're probably nowadays you're like that's a world record, you know. So, I mean, how much reading can you do? Like, you know, if you invest an hour in reading Srila Prabhupada's books, then you've satisfied your requirement for reading. You're gonna be a very scholarly person in no time, just by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada and all the acharyas and the mercy of Krishna. So I'll stop there. Are there any questions, comments, corrections, additions? Swavas Prabhu, Haribol.
Thank you for a nice clap. I just saw an interesting point in the purport, the very last 4 lines of the purport, and it's amazing. I'll read it. The entire material creation, therefore, is meant for the falsely egoistic living entities hovering on the mental plane under different illusions in the modes of material nature. So that's pretty interesting in terms of us in Krishna consciousness, how we have to be very vigilant in terms of what you suggested, that we should do authorized activity and not, because we born in this material world, false ego, we were on the mental plane. Mm-hmm. And we can see that when we are involved in that mental plane, so much havoc, distress, anxiety, anger, greed, lamentation, hankering, all these things exist because of the mental platform. Mm-hmm. So I thought this particular last 4 lines of the verse were extremely important for us as devotees to get off the mental plane and read Prabhupada's books as you suggested and get our information directly from the pure devotee.
Yeah.
So thank you for a nice class.
Very nice point. Yeah, it's the whole material, the nature of this world is trying to put us in false ego and forget our relationship with Krishna, cover us, put us on the mental plane. We have to really work at it to come to the platform of real ego, Krishna consciousness. Krishna 3, Krishna 2, Krishna 1, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.